How do you choose what books to read? We're at a stage in history right now where you could read 1,000 pages a minute from now to the rest of your life, and you still wouldn't read everything. You still wouldn't read everything worth reading. You've got to be really careful when you're choosing your books, because good reading is like good living, and we don't really have time to waste. We want the best stuff, and we want it now. And when you're busy reading something frivolous or something that doesn't nourish you, doesn't provide you with any entertainment or joy or spiritual questioning, whilst you're busy doing that, you cannot be doing the good reading. So whatever you're doing right now, you are by necessity neglecting or avoiding or ignoring doing something else. So whilst you're listening to me and watching me, you are not doing something else. Maybe you're not scrolling through clickbait websites, or maybe you are. You could probably do that at the same time, but I hope you're not. So I'm going to tell you how I choose my books, and this is the philosophy that guides me for the Hardcore Literature Book Club. This is how the books are chosen for that book club. Basically, you want books that are going to provide you as much spiritual, emotional, and personal nourishment as possible. And this is the sign of a book's value. It is how much you can discuss the characters or the people, the preoccupations and themes of the work, how much you can discuss it long after you've read it. Indeed, how much you want to reread it, because rereading is better than reading. So when you finish reading Anna Karenina, do you want to continue talking about the people of the novel? Now, I'm saying people because they're so psychologically complex, they're so real, that you feel as though you know those characters better than you know real people in your life, friends and family that you've known all your life. Do you want to keep talking about, thinking about, obsessing about what Anna did, what Levin did, how Vronsky acted, and the themes that govern the world of that novel? Fate, love, how men and women can understand or not understand each other, spiritual crisis, labour. Tolstoy's great work is just one example of a work that you can talk about from now to the end of your life, and you will never exhaust it. It's also an example of a work that you can revisit and always get more out of it. So as you age, how you react and respond to the world of the novel also matures and develops. And there are a lot of writers that do that, and there are even more writers that absolutely do not do that. You already know the great writers without me having to tell you. You know Shakespeare's on there, you know Jane Austen's on there, you know, if you want to talk about poetry, that Emily Dickinson's on there, okay? If you look at the Hardcore Literature Book Club syllabus, you'll see these works are pre-selected and pre-chosen for you. At the moment we're reading Anna Karenina, then we're reading Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, then we're reading Jane Austen's Persuasion, and then we're moving on to Marcel Proust's À la recherche de temps perdu, In Search of Lost Time. Along the way we're reading short stories by Chekhov, Turgenev, Maupassant, Borges. We're reading poetry by Emily Dickinson, Robert Browning, Shelley, Blake, and many more. You choose the works that nourish you deeply on multiple levels. You choose the works you can never exhaust. You choose the works that you wish to discuss. I ventured to say to one of my close friends, a man that I do a lot of deep reading with, I said it's somewhat of a shame, perhaps even a tragedy, that more people don't read these works. I'm talking about works by Proust, Cervantes, Shakespeare, Austen. And he said, is it a shame if you go to the southern island in New Zealand, or if you climb Mount Kilimanjaro? Now, not everybody does that. It is rare and it takes effort. But if you do that, is it any less beautiful? Is the beauty diminished for lack of other people? Does it have any bearing? And good point. I know that in Pascal's Pensées, he said that most people would never travel if they were not allowed to talk about it. So think about it. If I said to you, right, you can travel to as many exotic locations as possible, experience all these different cultures, sample the local menu, learn about different art and language and history, but you could never discuss it with another person, would you do it? Now, there's no right or wrong answer to this. If you say no, that's fully understandable, and actually it probably reveals a lot about your personality. Reading is not really a solitary activity. It is somewhat of a solitary activity, and it's one of the most rewarding solitary activities you can do, but it's communal as well. At the very least, you're communing with the author, with the writer, across time, across boundaries and cultures. You are in dialogue and in simpatico with one another. Now, if you want to take it to the next level, you discuss it with other people who are also reading the work, who are also being touched deeply by the work. So no, the southern island in New Zealand is not any less beautiful, but wouldn't it be nice when you climb Kilimanjaro and you take a big lungful of that air and look around, to turn over your shoulder and see your buddy, see your brother or sister, your loved one with you, sharing the view together. I think that would enhance the beauty. And so I'll stick to my guns and I'll say it is somewhat of a shame that people don't read these great books. And it is somewhat of a shame that of the people who read the books, even fewer people discuss them. And of the people who discuss them, even fewer discuss them in any depth. And that's because schools don't really teach us how to read these great books. This is how I read books and this is how I choose books. I go into each book, looking to expand my consciousness, looking to always pick up several more books and works from that work. Some people say, I'll never understand opera. I wish I could get into it, but I don't know where to start. Where do you start? Well, if you pick up Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, you'll see that the characters touch upon different operatic works, like Mozart's Don Giovanni, like Strauss's Die Fledermaus. This is how you get into opera. You can now get that as a freebie, pick it up. So now you're listening to Don Giovanni and you have something to guide you, something to hook onto. So when Stiva from Anna Karenina is dreaming of Il mio tesoro, you can go hunt that down and think, why is he dreaming of Il mio tesoro? What does that mean? And then you learn about the story of Don Giovanni. Maybe you watch it and suddenly you know a little bit about opera. And when you're reading Proust, he mentions all these paintings. If you treat Proust, or indeed any great writer, as though they are a never-ending Easter egg hunt, you go search out those paintings and suddenly you're into art. So in the Hardcore Literature Book Club, when we read Tolstoy, we also read Plato, we also read Freud, we also read Nietzsche and Schopenhauer and many more. Okay, so that's how you can get a huge education, a huge humanities education, and expand your knowledge of multiple domains just from one book. You pick up one book and suddenly you know something about 50 books. When we read Anna Karenina, we read Baudelaire. Why do we read Baudelaire? Because Tolstoy didn't like Baudelaire. Tolstoy thought that he was a degenerate. Tolstoy's theory of art was that it was this shared religious consciousness. He didn't like art for art's sake. He didn't like decadence. So when we're reading one of his works, we want to see what was he directly in opposition to? What didn't he like? So we sit down and we read Baudelaire. We read the banned poems, the poems that got Baudelaire in a lot of trouble. And that is just one example of the kind of reading we do. When Levin, a character in Anna Karenina, talks about Plato's Symposium, it's a thin work. We pick up Plato's Symposium and we learn a little bit about what Plato says about love. So by the time you get to the end of Anna Karenina, if you're doing this deep consciousness expanding work, you're treating each work as though it were an Easter egg hunt. You know about Plato, you know about Pushkin, you know about Mill, that's economic theory. You know about all that stuff. And that's how I choose my books. You choose one book wisely and you choose many books. So after Anna Karenina, we're reading Crime and Punishment. We choose that one book wisely, we read many books. If we read Proust, you have to read Shakespeare's sonnets because it's the same thing. And when you read his sonnets, you start to think about persona. You think about how it differs from the voice in the plays, the voice in the characters. So then you start reading the plays. And once you've started reading the plays of Shakespeare, you kind of naturally get curious about where he lifted his material from. So you go back to the classics. You read Ovid. You read Plutarch. All of a sudden, you have a classics education just from a play or two of Shakespeare. So that's how you choose your books. And I don't really waste time with books that aren't going to nourish me deeply. And that sounds snobbish, that sounds elitist, and when people have said similar things before, many years ago, I used to think, oh, what a snob. It's like they're ragging on popular literature. But the thing is, once you've read a lot of good books, if you try to return to lesser works, and you can define that however you want, you cease to get any pleasure from them. So it's not even like you can enjoy them as light escapist fiction. The thing is, if you want some escapism, and you want some trashy pub food style pleasure, you'll get that from the classics as well. You'll get that from Dostoevsky. You'll get that from Thomas Hardy. You will, and you'll get used to a certain level of difficulty, of expanding your consciousness. It's that search for the difficult pleasure. It's the reader's sublime. So there are some books that just don't make the cut. Which books do you choose? Choose the ones that have stood the test of time. When you find one book that you like, find out what that author, what he was reading or what she was reading, what was their influences, and then go down the rabbit hole. The books that have stood the test of time have done so for a reason. Another way you can choose your books is to designate someone as your book mentor. If you find someone whose opinion you value, who hasn't led you wrong so far, then you can designate them and just read whatever they recommend. I've done it multiple times in the past. I've said to people who are older than me, wiser than me, who've never led me astray, who've been a massive help in multiple domains of my life, I've said, you recommend a book, I'm going to read it. And I do so, and it fulfills me. So I would like to fill that role myself, and that's kind of why we're doing the Hardcore Literature Book Club. I'm going to select the books. These are well tested and weathered by time, and they've stood the test of time, and they are going to offer endless discussion, endless spiritual, emotional, and personal nourishment for you. And we're never going to stop talking about them. So that's how I choose the books. So I hope to see you there in the Hardcore Literature Book Club. Check out the link below and you'll see the current syllabus. Thank you for watching, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button.